So, but everything started here back in 1866 when the prison was established. This was West Virginia's maximum security under 29 years, from 1860 to 1995. When shut down, this was still home to 652 of the state's most violent inmates. About a third of them had some kind of life sentence, just to give you a better idea. Most of these guys were sent downstate to Fayette County to the brand new maximum security Mount Olive Correctional Complex. Some of them never left the zip code. And the reason for that is about a mile over on 12th Street is the maximum security Northern Regional Correctional Center and jail. So if you hear me on tour mention Mount Olive or Northern, that's just where these guys are currently incarcerated. Where we're officially starting your all's tour, this was non-contact visitation. This is the inmate side. Of course, their visitors use the horseshoe over there. And they started talking through the grates till about 1982. They found some visitors bringing dollar bills in here. They were coated with liquid LSD, and they roll those dollar bills up lengthwise so small and tight they could be passed through the holes given to these guys. Because of that problem, they had to install steel panels in between the grates, sealing them off, and after that's when they put the telephones in above the windows. So of course that would prevent smuggling of contraband, would give these men more privacy with their loved ones. And the cage behind me, when they were in here visiting, is where a correctional officer, a CO, would have been posted, usually with a pistol on his or her side, just to kind of watch this area. Obviously now that's our display for Old Sparky. That is a real electric chair. West Virginia had the death penalty in effect until 1965, when capital punishment was abolished. It's yet to be reinstated, despite the talk of it. But there were 94 executions on this property. 85 of those would be by hanging, and then 9 men lost their lives in that chair. That was back in the 1950s. When they switched from hanging to electrocution in 1950, they decided to send one of their inmates, who was a very good carpenter, Paul Glenn, up to Columbus Penitentiary, Ohio's first state prison. Reason for that, they had a chair there. They wanted him to make a pattern of that chair, and that's exactly what he did. Based off his drawings from Ohio, he came back to Moundsville. Paul built that chair himself, so it is inmate made. He built it out of solid oak, and for some reason, once he finished building the chair, Paul wasn't very popular in here, so he was transferred out shortly thereafter elsewhere for his safety. If you've seen The Green Mile for a Hollywood movie, that's somewhat authentic in terms of how gruesome, obviously a grotesque sight when that chair is in operation. The original equipment is up behind me here, the controls and the late stay phone. The only piece of equipment that goes with that chair that is not on display is the generator, simply because it's too big for us to fit in through that door. But all of that, nonetheless, would have been inside the execution chamber, inside the old death house. That building's been torn out many moons ago. When we're out on the north yard, I will show you where that building wants to tell you a little more about some of those executions. Y'all are going to see a lot of gorgeous, awesome artwork on your tour today. It was all done by the men who lived here. Not just some of the stories I like to share on tour, but I think the artwork itself lends the greatest testament to the wasted talent here. It's really a shame. A lot of these guys are very talented, very intelligent, a lot of wasted potential in this prison. We'll be out there, give or take about 90 minutes, traveling about an hour and a half on the first floor area. So now is your opportune time for restrooms if need be. The State Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation still own the prison. Aside from the tours that we do, the state, they host a lot of law enforcement and correctional training in there now, folks from around the world. Last week was an international law enforcement corrections training event, the Mock Prison Riot, that had between 1,000 and 2,000 guys and gals in here training. So with that training, they have installed modern surveillance equipment and signs that talk about live ammo hazards. You see any of that, pay no attention to it. Like I say, it was not here when the guys were in here. Once more, if you have any questions on tour, you see something you're curious about, please feel free to ask. So before we make it official and actually enter inside, do y'all have any questions? All right, well, without further ado, we'll make it official and go inside here.
All right, so that was the introduction to the prison. We're in here where the inmates would talk, as you heard him say. Let me take a quick look here. There we go. Pull this up. So that's kind of what you'd see. The phone would be up here. They used to talk through these grates. So here we go. This ought to be fun. some more artwork here. Just so everybody knows, I'm really feeling a lot of dread right now. It's kind of a little bit overwhelming, but we'll get through it.
Now it's official. This is what we call Main Street. This is the main corridor connecting the newer south end with the old north end. Back in the day, this was 9-8 corridor, the radio call sign for all this. We'll spend most of the time on the older Civil War era side. We make a loop. We'll be down here later for our final couple stops. That north end was built by the first men to arrive here in the 19th century. It took those guys 33 years to build their own prison. Ironically, only built it for about 800 men. Well, come the late 1930s, they had over 2,700 inmates over there. The cells on that side are 5 foot by 7 foot. There were 3 men living in each one. Now, when you see these cells, it will blow your mind. You'll see what I mean. It was not a long-term plan. So because of that, in 1929, West Virginia realized they needed more prison. Inmates started construction on this south end. Well, the only problem was October 1929, when the Great Depression began, Congress passed a law, no inmates should be hired for work. That in and of itself slowed down construction a lot, let alone the Depression and World War II and created conflicts about the state's flow of building materials. It took contractors nearly 30 years to finish all this side here. Our final stop today will be down the hall in New Wall. And I mention that now because that was home to the main line. That's the general population inmates. Most of the guys here, about 500 of them. And their convictions ranging everywhere from minor drug convictions to multiple murder convictions. Basically, the jail inside of this prison for the guys who were causing trouble on this side of the prison. 22.5 hours every day. So it's preferable to be on the new side in New Wall, in mainline.
In here.
The wall behind me, 300 feet north, was wide open, and the ceiling was roughly 1 floor higher. South Hall cell block, hard to imagine because this was 4 tiers high, 245 foot by 7 foot iron cells. And this is also the cell block that would have contained roughly death row cells they had back, of course, when West Virginia was executing these men. Well, in 1968, they had 2 riots here the same year, one in February, then one in June. Well, inmates set fire to much of the prison. They created a lot of damage here in the South Hall cell block, tearing things out of the walls like plumbing and what have you. So by early '69, this cell block was being torn out. They installed the new second floor. That became infirmary and psychiatric units. This lower level was kept wide open and converted into a dining hall, massive in size. They could feed about 300 at a time if need be. See, the only problem with this dining hall and its kitchen, this was infested with healthy meat-eating prison rats that looked like small possums, little cats, and dogs. They'd run around while they're eating, sometimes running away with their food. Inmates that cooked and served the food were never given hair and extra gloves. God knows what they're eating. Fingernails, hair, dead skin. At home, I've got reports of roaches that were found cooked in the mashed potatoes. Near the back of the old kitchen, they had to go through the sewer. And due to the ancient plumbing here, often days that sewer would back up into the floor of the kitchen while they're cooking. Ceiling in here is infested with mice. When they die, the flies come in, you know what happens next? Maggots. Not just inmates, but officers have told me. Occasionally, you would see them, almost like rain, falling from the drop towel, landing in your food, what have you. Hard to imagine all that in totality, of course, but not hard to imagine the number of violent riots in this prison's history because of these problems, these conditions, even by penal standards. Where you all are standing in this old dining hall, this is where West Virginia's last and most violent riot kicked off. The New Year's Day riot of 1986. See, it was a New Year's Day tradition. Officers would call in sick on New Year's Day. Well, they were partying a little bit too much. And over the years, inmates became aware of this tradition. Calling sick on a 3 to 11 evening shift was well below critical levels. did not happen. Everything fell into place for the inmates. 5:30 p.m. They took Captain Pat, Officer Hotel hostage at knife point. Within 15 minutes, they ended up with 15 officers and a food service worker hostage. And what was originally 20 inmates turned into 200 inmates. And they had control of most of the prison for the following 52 hours. They found 3 inmates in the prison that were considered snitches, what they call an informant, and they brutally murdered them. Well, here's the problem. They had been promised change by West Virginia over and over with barely any action. In minute, nothing's happening here until we see Governor Arch Moore for negotiations. Because, well, Governor was notified immediately. He didn't arrive till the following day. It would be cleaner, have more adequate AC and heat, and better food quality. And so that would cost the state taxpayers over $3 million. The new dining hall opened in March 1987. And at that time is when they took what used to be this big open room and converted it into the layout we know it as today. They put these walls up, so you would have had tables in here. And one of the guys that came in this room was colorblind. His name is Sean. So I'm blaming Sean for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm no expert on them, but they're wearing the wrong collar sashes and they're holding the wrong weapons. I think Raphael should be Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raphael. You get the idea of a nice job anyhow. So, in 1987, that is the ancient Adena people. And they were the mountain and 62 feet tall. So that display, late 90s, if we would bring it back, because they got tired after years and years of complaints from parents and teachers about the nudity. Sure, we'll bring it back. It's history, it doesn't bother us. Try and take care of it best we can, but the little boy over there in the corner is faceless. And the reason for that, a little over 20 years ago, there were 2 knights, members of the U.S. Marines, who were in here training with night vision goggles. I don't know why one of the Marines was in there to begin with, but he was. And in the darkness, that little boy startled him, so as he reacted and spun around, it was the butt of that man's rifle. Took the face clean off the little boy. So they have not been invited back here. What can you say though, right? He's a U.S. Marine, showed him who's boss. So, but back when this was a dining hall, we have remnants from it. That's why the gun cages out there. When they were in here eating years ago, you had an officer up there with a 12-gauge pump shotgun. The window next to Merlin the Wizard was their medication window. Usually blood pressure and psych meds that was prescribed to these men had to be taken with food. So they received those pills from a nurse behind that window. And once we get out here to the new hallway, you'll see it'll be a little easier for you to handle things. Any questions so far? All right.
We have many spirits here.
Oh, I know.
This is what the two spirits are.
Don't I know? There's the window he was speaking of. And up there is where the guard would be with the pump shotgun. And there's the face of the little boy that the Marine took off. So I've got to catch up. I'm trying to keep this thing rolling for you so I can bring you all in. So just bear with me. There's something bad here. Oh my God.
This is all new. So this wall, this is not here. Where I'm standing all the way back to that wall, and from this wall west by Jefferson Avenue, this is the dining section. So tables here. You get a better idea how big this was, right? Tile floor right here west, this was serving area where they would get their trays off the warming ovens and they loop back and head back to eat. Where the tile floor stops, all the way back and to the left, that was that old nasty kitchen. So So this was remodeled into the MDR main dining room hallway, being that it led to the new dining hall. The door in the middle and the door behind me took you into the state shop. State shop is where they stored clothes and beds. Of course, that was issued to them upon arrival. If need be, they would delouse them in there as well. I find it odd that they would do that near their clothes and beds. What can you say nonetheless? Now, being a history tour, 99% of the tour I tell folks about operational history, the construction phases, give you kind of an idea of what life was like for those who worked it and lived it here. But I do at times like to touch very briefly in here on our paranormal history, because we do have a lot of that here as well. If you've seen us on any of the TV or YouTube shows, you may recognize this hallway as the Shadow Man hallway. Well, the reason for that, back in May 2004, a very good friend of mine, my friend Polly Gear, she was staying the night in here. It was about midnight. She's in here by herself, heading down towards the lobby. She gets about halfway down when she said she heard a metallic noise behind her. And of course, as you would, she flips around, and right in front of the new cafeteria door, Polly said there was a solid black shadow standing there facing her direction. Well, when she put her light down there, whatever it was appeared to acknowledge it. It kind of moved, looked back at her. Weird enough, but she keeps walking backwards. She had a Sony Mavica camera, raised it, took one photograph capturing what we call Shadow Man. It's all over YouTube and Google. We do have a copy of it in our museum. Now, in all fairness, a little before Polly's visit in 1999, of all people, MTV was here to film the pilot episode of Fear. That show's been off air for many years. It's on YouTube now. If you watch our episode, it's, you'll get a kick out of it. Don't watch it for the history. They got a lot of it wrong. But nonetheless, that helped get us recognized nationally in terms of being seen as a haunted, supernaturally active location. You name one of those shows, at least television-wise, I promise you we've had them at least once. Not just MTV Fear, but Most Haunted from England, Scariest Places on Earth, Most Terrifying Places in America, Dead Files, Dresden Files, My Ghost Story, Ghost Stories, Ghost Asylum, Ghost Lab, Paranormal State, Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, Paranormal Challenge, Destination Fear, Mysteries of the Abandoned, Mysteries at the Museum, and Stranded, just to name a few off the top of my head. So, with any luck, I'll have some of y'all repeat those for me later.
Probably no. All of them. Dawn, what did I tell you when I walked in this room? Like I said, I walked into the room, you probably heard me tell Dawn there was something evil in here. Just like I said, I'm really having spooky feelings in this place. It's really crazy how spooky this place is. Over here. Y'all are gonna get kicked out of here. We don't. We're not doing anything right, neither.
Well, they told me you got to pull over DUI and vote for all. Last I heard, I looked for him on the church the other day on the DUI. I would think he's pretty lucky. You know what I'm saying? To say, oh, you're in, for a deal. Like California, I think California and a lot of other states, 3 strikes, you're out. So this was the new dining hall. Again, the main result of the 1986 riot. Inmates appreciated this. As strange as it sounds, they felt they put the effort into acquire this through the uprising. This was the only area worthy of speaking of that they had access to daily with air conditioning and heat. This was a nice 68 degrees or so every day. In the winter, the housing units could be as low as 45 and as hot as 130 in July on the top of the cell blocks. That was documented here. Comfortable area. Not only was it comfortable, but they ate pretty darn well in here. By, again, these standards. This was more like a full-service restaurant. You name it, they had it. Pork chops, hot dogs, hamburgers, chicken wings, onion rings, pasta, pizza, ham on Easter, and for Thanksgiving, they would cook over 200 turkeys. feed these guys a Thanksgiving meal, so it was not half bad. In the kitchen, preparing, cooking, serving the food would have been about 25 trustee honor inmates. That's the most well-behaved men on the prison. When these guys were not pouring mercury into the coffee, everything was pretty tasty. It was a pretty cushy job in there. Usually they policed one another. Didn't have a whole lot to worry about. So that's actually why they built the diagonal wall over in the corner. If you worked here, you would be charged $1.05, and you could come in here and eat with the inmates, and you're served the same food. So that's a testament, not just to the quality, but cleanliness of that food. And they knew that was a bargain. Couldn't get a better meal in Moundsville cheaper than $1.05. It is a little awkward that they had to sit behind that wall, but when you think about it, if they were an open view, you would have had 15 officers, staff members, 120 convicts. Now they're staring at each other. It's going to add to the tension over the years. I guess the idea was out of sight, out of mind back there. Many hundreds of lessons to learn the hard way here over the years, one of them being feeding as many as they used to in that old dining hall. It's not just easier, it's certainly safer to feed these guys in smaller groups, and that's why this is only for about 120 every half hour. That's half a cell block at one time. Understaffing was a big problem here, and I understand it's no different nowadays. But on a good day, you have 4 officers in here. You've got the officer in the middle with a 12-gauge pump. It doesn't matter because you can't do anything with it. You imagine taking the barrel of a 12-gauge and sticking it through a porthole that big? You don't have much range of movement. Let alone you got blind spots in here everywhere. The car, the columns, the stack wall. You had 2 floor officers in here with radios, usually one next to each of the water fountains. The 4th CO is the kitchen officer back there with a nice stick watching those inmates. They are trustees, but in here pretty serious convictions. Let alone the fact that back then some of them were working with big butcher knives. It's just the way it was. Artwork in here was done by the same guys who painted the visitation that we were just in a little bit ago. One of those guys, his name was Smitty Harvey. He was an over-the-road trucker. He was on the highway Monday to Friday each week, and he got home late one Friday night. He said that his wife Sandy, in his own words, had nagged him. What does he do? He murders his wife, or she went missing. 2 weeks later, state troopers found her in the deep well freezer. She had been dismembered. He was sentenced to life without mercy, without the possibility of parole. He was here in '95, transferred out. He was still incarcerated 6 or 7 years ago when he finally passed. And what to tell me? We speculate that truck over there is what his looked like in the nose. Now, they've told me anytime someone were to ask him why he done what he did to his wife Sandy, usually he would tell you the same thing. Oh, now I love Sandy, but she shouldn't have nagged me. Shows you he was where he needed to be. As I say, he's a decent artist, obviously not a decent husband, right? I don't always point this out, but there's a little something on this painting I'd like to show you. I've got a little story behind it. Right next to the cab door on this truck, there's 2 eagle wings and a heart, a little memorial that says Sandy. A good friend of mine, Maggie Gray, used to be an officer here. She retired on after the riot. She just recently retired a few years ago from Northern. She was working the floor in here one day when Smitty was in here eating, and she was kind of bugged by this because she knew that he killed Sandy, and she thought, why did he paint that? Is he remorseful or what? So she asked him. Made him mad too. He stood up real fast. They opened the porthole in the gun room, thinking he's about to do something to her, but he raised his voice, said, I was on the highway all that week. All I wanted to do was have a beer and sit on the couch, watch the ball game, but Sandy wanted to go dancing. Sandy wanted to go shopping, and she said he started flailing around, nag, 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 nag. Well, she's taken back by it. So she leaned into him and said, so what, you just killed her for it? Yeah, that's the only way I can shut her up. Can you imagine how unsettling that is? Just saying, as far as I can tell, she's probably happy to see her husband. She wanted to enjoy her husband's company. During the weekend, before he's on the highway 5 days, he didn't think how his wife felt. Sad story, but gives you insight to one of thousands of guys that was in here and the kinds of crimes committed. So, right behind me here is a painting of a mountain range. And there's a square crack around this painting. It goes up right here, over, and down. The square crack around this painting. A lot of people don't know about this. But when they were building this dining hall, this was the last section to be completed. They left this square open as a way of bringing equipment and supplies in through. When they finished filling this in, they left these cinder blocks hollow. Every other cinder block in here is filled in solid with concrete, and you can hear this. You can try it yourself, you'll hear how it's hollow. The idea was if there was another riot, they could break that down and have a point of entry, try and rush the prison again. In my opinion, and for what it's worth, I think that's more televisions after the riot, right? You know, I mean, they got this dining hall as a result, but some things got a little worse. Some things are status quo, but it's conceivable another riot could occur. It's kind of the old saying of putting silk stockings on a hog. You know, this prison was just built and laid out the way prisons used to operate 130 plus years ago, and it just increasingly got more and more obsolete as time went on. Not only did you got blind spots, but it became increasingly difficult to keep certain groups of inmates away from other groups according to court orders. That's just why I had to shut it down, along with the conditions. So, keep in mind those cameras and the microphones dropping down are not original. The canisters up in the ceiling, those are actually tear gas canisters that I don't know if they still use them for training, but they used to be used for training. Weren't here back in the day. Y'all have any questions?
What was the guy's name that painted that again?
His name was Smitty Harding.
Smitty Hart.
Smitty Harding. And the other two guys that painted in here in visitation was Sean Adamy. He was in for a burglary. Last I heard, he's out doing okay. He's the one caught on. And then Jim Andrews. He was in for murder. And
Oh, you're fine.
Correct. He actually just recently died in Mount Olive.
Okay.
So this is the kitchen that they would prepare the food in.
All right, go ahead out here in the north yard.
We're gonna go outside, but look at this place, guys. Isn't this crazy? Wow. I hope you guys enjoy this video. Like I said, I've got trying to get everything for y'all, so. No, you're fine. Oh, Dawn or Don? Oh, okay, well, you can run into me then. We're gonna be going outside, so looks like a little bit of rain, but that's all right. Bless you. Look at this place. Guys, this is freaking awesome. I so want to investigate this place. Wagon Gate. I don't know if you guys can see. Let me walk over this way. But down at the end is Wagon Gate. That's where they used to bring the horses and carriages in with the inmates. Check that out.
That is the hole. Yeah, that used to be solitary confinement until about 1960. They shackled them to the walls down there. A lot of guys went crazy down there. Some of them went blind down there because of how dark it was. And then later on, they turned that into a boiler room and a maintenance area. And they had a murder down there in October of '79. It was a trustee named Robert Wall, R.D. Wall. And he was, one of the inmates told me he was a king-size rat. He said his tail was longer than this prison is long. He would rat even officers out in front of him. He didn't care. And they pretty much butchered him down there. So this is all the north yard. Everything started at the north wagon gate in the distance, which resembles a church steeple. About 100 guys would have been housed in there, packed in like sardines while they built this side of the prison. Every block of sandstone was cut, beveled, and laid by convicts' hands. And they loosely modeled this prison after our sister prison, Joliet, in Illinois.
Nice.
I'm sure some of y'all have seen Blues Brothers, Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi. At the beginning of Blues Brothers, Al Wood picks his brother Jacob from Joliet, Joliet J. Joliet and Moundsville are both gorgeous examples of Gothic Revival-style architecture resembling a castle. with the embattlements and the turrets and crestollations. And like I say, you'll see this pride here in a little bit. When we're on the south end, you see what contractors built, machine cut stone. Does not hold a candle to what these men built over here. The main structure you're looking at was completed by 1876. The tallest part was the old administration building. State law required the warden and his families to live on the upper 2 floors till about 1960. That was normal life for them. The wife warden, their kids, the little wardens were even allowed to come out here and mingle with inmates. Of course, different world back then, but I've never heard of any trouble out of it either. Until 1960, the 2nd floor was administrative offices for not just the warden, but his deputy warden, the correctional magistrate, the prison clerk, records office, people and things like that. The 1st floor was the closest that they had to a lobby earlier on, and we'll be in there in a little bit, so I'm going to hold off on it for right now. The building right behind me, we call the Blue Building, but that was known as State Industries. Basically, general population inmates could have jobs in there Monday to Friday in workshops, kind of like a factory. Welding, electrical, woodworking, photography, automotive. They converted books to Braille and made license plates and highway signs for the state inside that building. If you have not seen it yet, you got to check it out here in a little while. In our museum, we have a 1982 plate that was a little bit yellow. See, a lot of the plates made here that year were yellow because inmates were peeing in the paint. Well, the reason they were urinating in the paint was they were clever enough to realize that the ammonia in their urine over time would cause plates to crack and peel from the sun. Well, they made piecework in there. So they realized the more pea plates they make, that's their job security, right? You're going to have to make more new ones. Smart, slick stuff. There's a notion inmates are dumb. I say they make dumb choices. They have the mental capacity and many of them the intelligence that could have done something better with their life. That's why I say it's a shame, they had to be here. Department of Corrections, they have some offices and classrooms in there now. The rest of that building is our event center. It's been repurposed into that. You name it, we have it in there. Everything from small scale concerts to MMA fights, gun shows, class reunions, charity dinners, you name it. And best of all, my favorite, weddings. Truth be told, we have 2 or 3 couples each year get married here. We had a wedding a couple weekends ago. A lot of people say, oh, that's too weird, that crosses the line. I don't. I personally cannot think of a better place to receive my life sentence. I got a lot of cheesy dad jokes. It's a happy life sentence, right? So, big difference here. The base of the walls are painted white because in 1980 the inmates started wearing khaki and it was easier for them to camouflage into the sandstone. See, they knew all too well about escapes being a big problem because they had around 500 of them here. It's embarrassing to admit that. The only bright sides that got them all back, but a couple few. Of course, nothing but time to plan for an escape and literally nothing to lose by trying, so why not was the mindset. They had a couple tunnel escapes. Numerous times they would steal a vehicle, drive out, crash out, try to. They would tie uniforms, bed sheets together, and try and make ropes and climb those 25-foot-high walls. This side of Moundsville grew up around the Penn's walls. People ask about that all the time. It certainly looks strange, certainly in contrast to today's world. But when you think about it, the neighbors are the safest people in the whole area, even if it was a mass escape, because they're not going to hang out next door for long. They're going to gain ground as fast as they can into the mountains, across the river into Ohio. I've been told stories from the locals. On a nice summer day, the town's kids were riding their bicycles around the prison, and they themselves could witness an inmate jump or slide off the wall in front of them and take off running. It was just the way it was. So other than the inconvenience of the roadblocks that had to be set up, people never really worried a whole lot about it. Even over here at the corner of 8th and Jefferson is a little elementary school, so just, different time. We're going to work our way a little closer towards the north gate.
One of the buses here. It's pretty cool to do this for you guys, and you get to see this. This prison is just absolutely unbelievable. Unbelievable. And reiterating what you heard before, here's some of the bus that bring them in. To reiterate what you heard before, inmates built this prison. So they built their own prison. Isn't that crazy? It's just nuts. Here, look at the gun tower up there. Thought I would share that. But just the architect, look at the architectural work on this. It's unbelievable. I'm astonished at the work, hand work that was done. You know, because back in them days, they didn't have machinery per se, you know, like we do today. So, but I don't know if you caught this is where the inmates that built the prison, they would stay in this wagon gate. So they housed them there. I'm not talking a whole lot because I want you guys to experience this.
These fences over here, we call these bull pens. And there's two of them. The yard's one on the south end, yard two.
That's where they came out.
Take the size of these two bull pens and square them. And in the same spot, picture a two-story white building. That was the death house. That's where the executions were held. Built in 1899 at the cost of $7,000. Until June 1931, you could have came here on the day of a hanging. You would walk through the north flagging gate with your kids in a picnic basket. You're charged no more than $2 a person, and you can watch a state-sanctioned hanging. The Moundsville newspaper would advertise the hangings exactly like this. I could picture it. Bring your family down to the state pen and enjoy a nice hanging. Well, what brought all that to an end was back on June 19th, 1931, the execution of Frank Heyer, who beat his wife to death. He was described as being a big little man. He was 5'8", weighed over 350 pounds. When a hanging's done correctly, the rope is measured on a calculation of the person's height and weight. Frank's rope was too long. Drop doors open, Frank instantly decapitated in front of people who paid hard-earned money to be there. Some people argue that they got their money's worth that day. I don't know so much about that, but I have read articles. Some of the witnesses were quite upset by it. So after that, executions were made by invitation only. So you had to be related to the inmate, or a member of the victim's family, or a member of the media, otherwise to have access to those executions. Upon the abolition of the death penalty back in '65, didn't have a purpose for that building, so they tore it out a couple years later, 1967, under Warden Bowles' administration. Right behind the industry building is a small blue building that used to, many years ago, be a two-story brick building. And that was the female quarters. Because until 1947, this prison was co-ed. Not just men and women, but juveniles as young as 12 was incarcerated here. Oh, wow. Now, at most, about 100 ladies were here, and they did their best to keep them separate from the men. Now, people often ask, who is the most infamous inmate here? If you ask me, I'll tell you one of those ladies, Kathleen Maddox. By chance, anyone recognize Kathleen Maddox? Yes. Charlie Manson's mom, Kathleen, and his uncle Luther were both here because back in 1942, they robbed a gas station in Charleston with a broken ketchup bottle. Well, strong arm robbery. At the time, he's about 8 years of age, growing upriver from us in a little town called McMecken with his Aunt Glenna. Coming here a lot to visit his mom. There's an interview on YouTube of Charlie from the 70s out at San Quentin. I think it's a Tom Snyder interview. Anyhow, Charlie is asked at one point, Charlie, tell us about your mother. And he kind of sparks up. He said, my mother's the icebox. My mother's the penitentiary. He's talking about this prison you're in right now. I guess that's his thought association. When he thought of his mom, he's seen this place in his mind's eye. He still has people who live not far away to this day. So back in March 1983, he's at Vacaville. He writes a letter to Donald Bordenkircher, the warden here, requesting transfer here, put him close to his people. Now, we do have a copy of that letter in a museum. Bordenkircher had a reputation in corrections as being a tough guy and a tough talker, very firm and very fair. If you ask me, he's probably about the best warden they ever had. And in true fashion, he responded to Manson with a letter, Dear Charles Manson, when hell freezes over. Signed, Donald Bordenkircher, Warden WVP. So, no favors for Charlie here, but we got a lot of trivia about him around here. Before he moved to California, him and Rosalie Willis were married at the Episcopal Church in McMecken. At home, I've got a copy of their marriage certificate. So a lot of weird stuff around here. But ladies were sent downstate in 1947 to a prison for women in Pent Springs. Now the ladies that are in the state prison are at a place called the Lakin Correctional Center. That's near Point Pleasant, Mothman Country. So the building they got there now, that was the OMC, Old Man's Colony, for inmates 65 and older, usually with trouble walking or defending themselves. It was a safer area, keeping away from the younger guys. Up until a couple weeks ago, they still had their electric fence set up over there. They weren't wanting them, not worried about them getting out, they just didn't want no one getting to them. That was basically a dormitory, and when it closed, the youngest man that walked out of there was 76, and the oldest was 92. So the horseshoe hallway in the lobby is an extension of our museum. Check it out later. You'll see some articles and a picture of that man. His name is Freeman Collins. Spent well over 50, almost 60, I believe 60 years incarcerated. So sad to say, not much of a life. That building's now been turned into the Marshall County Adult Education Center. They do GED classes. Now these bullpens were the recreation yards for the North Hall. North Hall was segregation, and as I said earlier, in simple terms, it was the punishment area. It was the lockdown unit. It did not matter what an inmate's conviction was. This was for the guys getting in trouble, be it a minor rule violation or serious felonies committed in this prison or other state prisons here. Escape, murder, things like that. There are 165 by 7 iron cells in North Hall. Since they're locked down 22 and a half hours a day, they're fed on plasticware inside their cells. The only time they would leave, they'd be strip searched, escorted out, usually one at a time, until you got 3 to 4 in each bullpen, where they will spend 1 hour a day. They go back in, they get strip searched again, they get about a 10-minute shower 3 days a week. Other than that, they're taken back to their house for the next 22 and a half hours. Inmates called North Hall the Alamo. They said it was their last stand, mostly because it was a kill-or-be-killed type of an environment. It was hell on earth. Not only are the guys in there for causing trouble, but many of them know they'll never leave prison alive. They felt they had nothing to live for. It's been very careless, very, very dangerous. In my opinion, the testament of that is the razor wire up top. People often ask if that was installed last week. Looks are deceiving because that is from 1987. That is stainless steel military grade concertina wire, like what's used in combat. It's designed to bleed you out. It's wicked stuff, nasty. Every inch is razor. The butterfly shaped meat hooks on it cause more damage in your muscle fibers and things like that. From what they tell me, that was manufactured by the Gillette Razor Company. So yes, it is the best a man can get. It's not half bad. I got a lot of weird jokes. So when we go in the North Hall, you're going to see the first 4 cells that you approach are separate from everybody else. And the reason for that was they were the 4 highest ranking gang members of the Aryan Brotherhood in here, the AB, who operate like organized crime in prisons. They kill anyone in their way. The AB had a lot of control in here after that riot in '86. The first cell you'll approach as we enter was home to the leader of that gang in Moundsville, William Snyder, who everyone known as Red Snyder. He shot his father and father of his sister's boyfriend in the face with a rifle. He got here, he wanted to be king of the hill. Killed a couple guys himself that we know of. Very feared, very respected inmate. No one wanted to cross him. Well, 2 cells down from Red was his buddy Russell Lassiter, who's better known as Rusty Lassiter. In the beginning, he was in here for grand larceny, but he was involved with a stabbing, actually a murder on the other side, so they had to segregate him. Well, Red and Rusty could usually play well together, so they were the only 2 of those specific 4 gang members allowed out here together for a short period of time, thinking they're keeping each other out of trouble. In the afternoon of November 16, 1992, Red took some drugs like he would if he had drugs, he'd take them. So he had a buzz on the yard. Well, he had Valium on this day. He got very high on Valium. There's a 2-stage lock in there, which I will briefly demonstrate inside, but because of that 2-stage lock, by the time Red and Rusty's doors are open, unlocked, the officer is all the way at the other end of the cell block. Well, Rusty walked out, he goes up, he looks in at Red, kind of opened his door, looks in, said, "You ready to go out to the yard?" He asked him a couple times, but see, Red was still on his bunk. You know, he's defenseless, visually impaired from Valium. He was talking slurred speech, moving in slow motion. Rusty stepped inside Red's cell, pulled out a dull shank, and he stabbed Red 37 times in his chest, neck, and face. He was stabbed so many times in his throat, his cause of death was asphyxiation. He drowned on his blood. If you're into the paranormal, I will tell you, those of us who work here, we do believe that Red is an active resident. You'll know it when you go in. His cell is the first one you'll approach. It says Aryan Brotherhood and all that in there. There is low clearance with the ceiling, so you'll want to watch your head as we enter, watch your step. By all means, step inside the cells to get a picture, whatever. Please don't close any of these doors. They will, not all of them will open back. Personally, I don't have a lot of faith in the VFD here in town to get you out of there. So, there is a lot of artwork, writing left behind in the cells. It's original from the convicts. A lot of colorful language, FYI, but we've left it behind to maintain the integrity of that history. So, like I say, go in here, just watch your step. Don't forget, watch your noggin.
Watch your noggin, boy.
You drive for us? Yeah. I was just with Art up here. Yeah. What's that? I'm out of the display terminal. Yeah, in this way. Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
All right, we're going inside now, as you can see.
Hi, guys.
Walking with them would do my group.
All right, so we're inside of the jail, and so we're going to be going into some of the cells. I'm already getting weird feelings, bad vibes in here. I so want a ghost hunt in here.
They have to be careful so as to not get their hand too close to the convict, passing the tray, otherwise they could reach through and they could pull you in through there. Some of these guys were hall boys, what they called a inmate janitor. Well, they would stock up on broomsticks, turn him into a spear, run an officer through. Officers trying to give a man his pills one day had a broomstick. They would score this down either with a razor blade or with dental floss with toothpaste on it, an abrasive, even comment. Back and forth until that's thin enough they can snap that off by hand, take that strip of steel, sharpen it on the floor into a shank. Cell number 8 is a good example of all the sharpening on there's grooves. That's just how many times they sharpened them in there. Top left corner is Scrappy's door panel right here on number 9 down to my pinky. You'll see how that's missing. That's what it looks like when it's been removed. Same thing on number 10 in the exact same spot. Any panel that you see weld beads, that's where at some point they tried the same thing and they had to reinforce it. See down here on number 5 got a nasty one because how easy they could hide that. Top panel to my pinky. See the score mark came down a little bit farther, just snapped off right there. It's like breaking asparagus or something. But anyway, you get the idea. So people will say, well, I don't understand, why didn't they, why didn't they hear it? It's so loud in here they couldn't hear it anyway, the sharpening. But the second question, why didn't they find them? Why didn't they search them? They shook the cells down and searched them. Truth be told, not as much as they could have, but it didn't matter. They used to find shanks every day in the prison. Occasionally we still find them. My buddies used to call me the Bloodhound. I found a lot of nice ones. I've got a little collection at home. Nothing but time to make it, nothing but time to fairly matter. These guys could take items they were required by law to provide them, turn them into deadly weapons and menace. They have to brush their teeth, sharpen that toothbrush handle, melt it, then put your razor in it, like a scalpel. They're allowed stationary. You consider a mechanical pencil, a big pen, potentially a deadly weapon. They fed them on plasticware. It's safer than silverware. Well, foul a piece of plasticware down, it'll kill you just as dead as anything else. Or if you melt it and sharpen it, same deal. These guys could make weapons out of something simple as toilet paper or newspaper. Basically, they fashion toilet paper in the shape of a shank, and they use a process like paper mache, soapy water, toothpaste. Get it hard enough, they can stick it to some kind of paper. It's crazy. It's crazy stuff. So you see the shanks in the museum now, you get a little better idea how all that was manufactured, made in here. Number 9 checkout, that was home to Danny Alexander. Everyone called him Scrappy. When he got here, he was 19 years old, and he had 11 years for attempted murder. He's actually living in Moundsville now. You may run into him later, or you can find him on Facebook, whichever's faster for you. He's there too. But we have one of Scrappy's khakis in our museum. It's got a lot of his artwork on it. A lot of good music in there. Nice taste of music, a lot of classic rock. There's a Stephen King inspired show on Hulu that was filmed here partially called Castle Rock. If you watch season 1, episode 2, 3, and 4 of Castle Rock, not only will you recognize the entire prison, but you will recognize number 9. I won't spoil it, but Bill Skarsgård, the actor that plays the It Clown Pennywise, if you watch it, you'll see him there at number 9. So, a little Hollywood action there. When an inmate flushed his commode, usually what was in his commode ended up in his neighbor's sink.
Oh.
A lot of times the guys down here are going to yell, flush! That way they knew, here it comes. Now if I'm an inmate and number 7's my house, I don't like my neighbor, I'll just use my bathroom 2 or 3 times in one day, flush it on him when I hear him brush his teeth. No. You think how nasty, what it smelled like in here. Not just body odor, raw sewage, cigarette smoke, bird droppings from broken windows. It's crazy. It's crazy. If you've never seen a West Virginia palm tree, check out cell 7.
That ought to be good.
It's ADA compliant for Bill Elias and Paul Hankish. They were rivals. Well, one day Bill had some Cleveland Mafia buddies come down and rig Hankish's car with a bomb in a little town north of Wheeling called Warwood. If you Google the Hankish car bombing, it's America survived, but it did blow his legs off. Well, he started over in mainline population like most of the inmates would, but he thought he was untouchable, and he couldn't stop bragging to everybody, that he could do whatever he wanted because he knew he wasn't worried about North Hall. He knew the cell doors were too narrow for his chair. Well, he bragged so much, eventually one of the workers got wind of that, and they fixed that. That way he could put him in there. Can you imagine doing anything in one of these cells to begin with, much less when you got a chair in there with you? So, I've been told, I don't say that. Never mind. But if you're into mafia history, there's a book on his life called Murder Never Dies. Murder Never Dies. So, Paul No Legs Hankish. It sounds mean, but that's actually what they call him. So.
Oh, you're gone. You got? Okay.
Now this was their day room. Since these men were fed in their cells, these tables are where their food trays were prepared. Using the cart behind me, they put all the servingware and plasticware out, portion everything out right in here. This was the staging area, or preparation area, prep area for all that. Most of the inmates in here went to the yard to the door at the end of the unit. Again, they're strip searched on the way out, and again, an hour later coming back in. After that, they set up these tables. When they have 4 men ready, they shower them 4 at a time in the cage right there, which is known as the gang shower. Of course, it does not look like our showers at home. It doesn't operate like them either. The plumbing is a 1/4-inch pipe on the top of the fence. It's not a lot of water for 4 grown men. Now, temperature and pressure of that water is controlled by COs. You can can use your imagination. One officer was very honest with me and told me if he had a guy in there that threw vomit in his face or whatever, he said he would just wait and watch him. Once he's lathered up and soapy, that's when he knew to turn the water off. Make him go back soapy. This way water. I can't frankly say I blame him. So where we came from was B block, the street side is A block. It's basically mirrored. More or less looks the same. So old-fashioned cell block, cells facing outwards. Now it's either a dormitory or a pod. Usually 2 tiers high and no taller, and like a horseshoe or like a baseball diamond. Now we have an area in the middle for an officer to have better visibility, as opposed to these days when you need more staffing on both sides to have that visibility. Funny little story real fast about the crow's nest up there. They had an officer up there for a couple weeks named Oliver, who carried a .357 Magnum revolver. Well, see, Oliver prided himself on his quick draw ability. He'd be up there and he'd be doing all these tricks and showing off with his partners, and he'd yell down here and, hey, look at this, and he's playing quick draw. Well, accidentally one day he shot himself in his knee. Bullet went down his leg, came out sideways out of his ankle. Of course, he's on medical leave for a few weeks, afraid that he wouldn't have a job to return to. When he came back here, not only did he still have a job, he was promoted and he was put in charge of the armory. God's truth. I don't know why. Maybe they thought he would be the guy for the job because he would never do that again. One could hope,
That's strange.
Y'all have any questions? See anything you're curious about?
Those centers up there, those cells also?
That was the pipe chases.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and what's funny, one of the officers told me it got to a point when they were about to shake a tear down or whatever, they would have an officer at either end with their head in that pipe chase, watching and listening, because when they knew they would start shaking down, they said they would be dropping their stuff out of their vent. He said, you hear ding, 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 ding. This all the stuff they're dumping out through their vents, and that's where I found a couple of that stuff, and the pipe chases up there. But, well, not specifically up there, but down there.
So even now, we're still finding things that
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I found 2 hacksaw blades in the chase down there at the very bottom, back to your reds. I found a, honestly, one time I was looking for it, I found a very, I can tell they just got it from somewhere. But it was obvious from an inmate because they took electrical technique.
Yeah.
Sure enough. All right, so we'll move next door. Just watch you step in the doorway.
Roll Tide.
Roll time.
Alabama Roll Tide.
Let them go first and then you take my picture behind. Oh, you could do it on this one. You could be on
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I have a piece of food, I clean them down the whole make it. Yeah. I don't know what from where to get a big plane. They want money. Oh, yeah. You know what I'm saying? That time and green and all that.
You see the bullet holes in the gym fair that's coming from the outside in?
In the windows? Yes. Yeah, I have to watch that. I'm sitting around, yeah, I noticed that, yeah. So this is the center of the old administration building, the closest they had to a lobby in the earlier years. We prefer to call this immediate area the wheel for this strange contraption in the middle. This is an old-fashioned revolving door, or like a turnstile from 1894. It was operated manually for a few years until 1899. They motorized it with a trolley car motor. There's a spindle on top of this wheel, and it had a cloth belt around it. This wheel, at the north wagon gate with the main entrance and exit points for the prison for most of the years, it didn't matter who you were. If you're coming to work, visit, or live here, you most likely came in through here. And it also doubled as an extra layer of security, keeping inmates over here and away from, the other side, the front, and upstairs. It's controlled by an armed officer on the other side who had a big key, went to this door. You could argue it's one of the more important locks in the prison, keeping them over here. One reason that the other side's flush. Make it harder for an inmate over here to sabotage it somehow. They just, jam it with something where they could pop it open later. So only 2 of these exist on Earth. The other one is still in operation at a prison in Manchester, England. It's called H.M. Strangeways. So this was modeled after Strangeways' wheel. 1970, Jimmy Stewart, Kurt Russell, Strother Martin were here filming Fool's Parade. That movie, I think, is on YouTube. The first 20 minutes is filmed in Moundsville, but the opening scene of Fool's Parade is a shot of Jimmy Stewart and Strother Martin spinning on this wheel being let out of prison. Pretty cool stuff. About 8 years ago, Netflix was here, and they filmed an original series called Mindhunter. And that's a show on FBI profilers. If you got a kick out of Criminal Minds, you'd enjoy Mindhunter. Season 1, episode 9, they have an episode on Richard Speck. He was the killer from the Chicago area. You watch Richard's episode, not only will you see the wheel in the background, you'll see some of North Hall and Newhall that will be in here pretty shortly. So, like I said, a little more Hollywood action there. Processing and payroll was on the right of the wheel. One of their old visiting areas was on the left. 2 rooms on that side was the United States Post Office. Inmates, a few inmates would sort the mail after civilian employees had searched it. The other side used to be a barber shop, and later on a leather shop and commissary. Now, when the prison closed, the barber shop was closer towards our lobby, and it was ran by a convicted murderer who had a 25-year sentence. Of course, very trusted inmate since he had the shears and everything. He didn't just cut inmate and officers' hair. As recent as the 90s, families were allowed to come in. They would literally bring their kids in and get their hair cut by a killer. It was seen as a bargain. He charged you no more than a quarter, 50 cents to cut your hair, and he would shave men's necks with straight razors. In that horseshoe hallway in the lobby, there's a picture of a little boy getting his hair cut. Eerie, because you realize it wasn't taken down Jefferson Avenue, it's taken in here. Crazy stuff. My buddy Mike, his dad started bringing him here when he was 4 years old to get his hair cut. That inmate was a model inmate, did good work. After 25 years, he's released. He moved immediately to Texas. He's got his barbershop now in operation at Houston. So he may very well be cutting someone's hair as we speak. So, good friend, he got a new start in life, but you never really know who's cutting your hair. So. I think that little Sweeney Todd type of stuff going on right there. So be sure to get a shot of the wheel. It's safe to step on if you like to. Because again, the only other one on Earth is in an operating prison. You can't get photos of it. Welcome to get all the ones of ours you like. I had a school group on tour yesterday, junior high. I had 33 of them on there. They said, "Will we fit?" I said, "Well, if you want to try it, let's go ahead and see." I said, "You're going to have to get a little friendly with one another, just not too friendly." Well, we are in prison, but still,
I had 72 bucks when I was a kid, and we decided to show how many people we could get in. I was in the back seat, and I don't know if you know anything about a bug, but the battery isn't in the back seat. Well,
Dawn, you guys going in?
We went in, and it got to the terminal on the top of that battery. I was like, what?
Jail. You would turn the thing. And then
That was just like the jail we were in.
Blackford County.
What was it?
Blackford County Jail.
We were just talking about that. Look at this, guys. Here, let me go out. Am I scaring you, Sally?
It was 72 super. pumpkin orange. I mean, when I say orange, it was orange.
Yeah.
Miss that car. I have a 2006 now. That's a convertible that could be hers.
There you go, yeah. And isn't the,
That's pretty cool.
I don't know about all of them, but some of them, what's the motor in the trunk?
Motors in the back on all of them, except for the new ones. They put them in there, and they had a lot of electrical problems with them too. But yeah, this is sad. Anybody could work on it. In fact, I'll work up.
This is really cool. So here's inside. Why? Because that's kind of like Eloise,
I
right?
don't want to be tricked with prisoners.
Huh?
I just want to be tricked with them. Oh, yeah, don't go mad at all.
I hope you guys are enjoying this.
Now, this is kind of the back of the old kitchen that was later repurposed for the new dining hall oven. That was one of the old grease traps in the floor over there. 3 big ice machines set in that corner. Usually some of the older guys maintained them and stocked with ice. Well, one summer, spring and summer, they noticed they were making excessive amounts of ice and some of these guys weren't eating normally. Well, eventually an officer came through one evening, found an inmate behind one of the machines. That's when they discovered what they had really been up to. They'd been tapping into the water lines of those ice machines, putting bread and fruit in there so they could make homemade alcohol. They called it julep, also known as hooch or pruno, homebrew. Well, as they're making their homebrew in here, they're stocking up on all the grape jelly, grape jam from breakfast. So what they would do, they make that alcohol, and then they pour the alcohol in the grape jelly, stir it in, take it down a new wall, give it out to whoever. Half of that year, these guys are getting hammered, and they're getting away with it. They can stand right in front of an officer and do it. All they had to do is just eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Peanut butter and jelly. It's like a jello shot. Clever stuff. If there's a will, there's a way, you know?
75 minutes, and I've lost connection a couple of times.
Yeah.
But we've been 75, probably 80 minutes on this video,
Oh, wow.
on my live.
Okay.
But we're almost done. My legs.
Yeah, we are, because that's where we came in.
Yeah.
Because I had already gotten pictures there.
My legs are killing me.
Yeah.
I got overwhelmed in them cells back there.
Did you really?
Oh God, yes.
I did an EVP in Red Cell. I hope I got something, but there's so much noise. Hope that I don't know.
Hey Dawn, do you have sage? You have sage.
No.
Huh?
No.
Right.
Why?
Because I should have brought some. We might be able to get it over there. Maybe. Oh, my leg.
There's a big stick there.
Yeah, that is a. More or less become a permanent picture out here, I guess. So this is South Yard. Earlier we were over the central wall on the other side. Now you see better what I meant earlier about the night and day difference from what inmates built compared to what contractors build. Machine cut stone. It's a huge difference, you know. And that was the original south wall until 1929 when they started building that side, or this side.
Would you
That's
give
why
me
that
a
wall
look at
has
that
a
view?
slant to it. So.
Down. Get a look at that.
This is your main line yard, general population inmates. They didn't have it nice, but a heck of a lot better than North Hall guys. As I said earlier, a lot of the work internal to the operation of the prison here was done using these guys' labor, and plus they could have jobs in the industry factory. So, aside from any commitments they had to work or schooling, otherwise they could spend most of their days out here from around 8 or 9 in the morning to almost 10 at night, most days. Everything you see out here is original, except for the buses and the obstacle course in the southeast corner. That's just here for the training nowadays. Exercise bars on the old weight pile are movie props from a film called Out of the Furnace with Christian Bale, Woody Harrelson, William Dafoe. So if you watch Out of the Furnace, say more Hollywood action yet again. Down in the field there, that was a baseball football field. They called themselves the West Virginia Cougars. Excellent athletes since they had nothing but time to practice. Usually it was the local school kids and college students. They'd come right into this yard and play against the inmates. I know at least as recent as the 1950s, they even had away games, believe it or not. They'd bust them up to Wheeling or even down towards New Martinsville, have games. The inmates built the chapel around 1980 after a donation of the local churches of $20,000. Christian inmates donated the rest. They all came together, pitched in, built their all-faith chapel. Number of services each week, most of which were Christian, but they also had some Hindu and Muslim services, Jewish services. And in the early 90s, after a 2-year lawsuit, eventually they had to let the devil guys go in there and do whatever they do. A lot of controversy I've read about that here in the early 90s. But nonetheless, a very important area for these guys. For a while, they allowed them to marry their fiancées. That was seen as a way of giving them gumption, motivation to leave prison, become a better man, and start a life. Inmates, when they built the bathrooms, it looked quite different. It was enclosed and walled off. Well, they found themselves with a private bathroom on a maximum security yard. Not the brightest idea in the world. You can use your imagination. A lot of nasty stuff happening there. There was a guy named Mark. He was over in the corner where the stall is. He's asking favors. From what's been told to me, he was asking favors from a couple guys, right? Okay, well, they didn't like it. And they grabbed him by the back of his head. They bashed his face off the wall and commode. My buddy Steve has copies of the crime scene photos. I've seen them. I don't know how he made it because his face looked like ground beef. He had to have reconstructive surgery on his head. After that, the walls were torn out and improved the visibility and improved the safety of all that. Remember, no privacy in prison anyhow, so. Little white room in the corner was a TV repair station. That's also where all the cable TV was spread out to the rest of the prison from that point. And that was also a small-scale AM radio station, broadcasted by inmates for inmates, as WPEN. They played music, they broadcast the Cougars games, news reports, things like that. Most of the cells had some kind of radio in or another, but they could even have Walkman radios, stuff like that. So, I think we have a Walkman in the museum, actually. Underneath there is one of the entrances into the south basement, which is full size. It's huge. That's mostly where the Smoke and Mirrors haunted house attraction is located. We open up each October. But there was an indoor recreation room down there used when the weather was really bad. It is below 0 or stormy. Inmates would be taken off this yard in groups of around 100 for a couple hours to get them out of the elements. And it was more like a pool hall. Pool tables, pool cues and all. ping pong tables, couches, and arcade games. You know, the old vintage Atari, Pac-Man, pinball, stuff like that. Pretty nice area considering they're in a maximum security pen. Only problem was usually they're left on their own in there. Again, you could have, you know, several dozen, almost 100 guys in there at a time for a couple hours. Now you gotta realize if you live in a place like this and you're a victim of a crime, you have barely any luck finding someone to testify in your defense, on your behalf. You can use your imagination with what's gonna go on in an area like that where they know that they can get away with whatever they want. I'll give you a better idea. The inmates called it the Sugar Shack. And the rest is history. It was a sweet place to be. I'll leave it at that.
Love it.
So you would have had about 200, 300 plus guys out of here at a time, usually one yard officer watching them with a radio, who's relying on the tower officers with the long rifles, watch their back and be a good shot if they have to be. Y'all have any questions? Usually at this point, I say we have our grand finale, which is in Newwall, where these guys lived. What you're going to see is 4 cell blocks, 320 cells. They're going to look bigger, but they're still 5 foot by 7 foot. They're just about 9 feet tall, so they are a little taller. More importantly, once we get inside Newwall, we're going to do something to round out your tour today, and it's going to make it more of an authentic prison experience for you.
You okay? It's almost done. We're at our last stage.
Oh, I'm enjoying it. Don't get me wrong. There's the chapel that they were talking about that they built. Just to give you guys an idea. Pretty cool, huh? It's pretty wild. I hope you guys are enjoying this. I know it's going to be a very long video. And it'll probably take 2 days to upload to YouTube, but I hope you guys enjoy it.
Radio.
This was the radio station, WPEN. Pretty crazy, huh?
I only keep you in there about 30 minutes. I can get you out. 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. That's when the doors were removed.
They're gonna lock us in the cell here for about 30 seconds. You'll hear the bell ring. You gotta move your arms.
You want in there with them? I'll get.
Come in here with us. We're getting
Oh my God, I gotta be in here with all 3 of
If you like ghost stuff or the ghost stories, you can follow us on Facebook. We're going to be live tonight on a ghost hunt. Ready? Everything can see it.
So we're locked up right now in a
buddy.
jail cell.
Let us out! You guys let us out! You gotta let us out! Are you gonna come help? Can you help me get out? Are you gonna open the door? Can you open it? I can hear her cry.
This is crazy. I don't know if
I wasn't talking to you, Don. Does it bother you that we're sharing the cell with you? I'm not gonna hear
On fire.
There was multiple fires in this.
again.
To the front. Don't forget,